You know, I have a subject that I want to discuss with you today. It's a little different than what I usually do. It has to do with God and with His giving and with His attributes, His attribute of giving. The other day I got in my mind about the attributes of God, and I started looking through. And one of the nice things today, you can go on the internet, and all these theological books that you couldn't tote them all around with you everywhere you went, but I carry all kind of theological books with me now. Just look them up on the internet. And so I looked up 10 theologians, and I looked at attributes of God. And some of them did 12, 15. One of them did 30 attributes of God. All this thing about His greatness, His all-knowing, about omniscience, omnipresence, and all those wonderful things. And then I kept looking, and I'm thinking, there's something missing here. There's something that no one has mentioned, and that's His generosity. Not one theologian. There's no such word as omnigenerous. No such word. It doesn't even exist in the dictionary. Omnigenerous. And, you know, all that we've been taught and all that preachers teach you, and preachers especially that have been trained how to preach and how to study, all these cardinal doctrines, all these attributes of God, these are the places that they find their balance whenever they preach their messages, to know how to preach and teach people how God really is. He's all-knowing, He's all-present, and all those things. But then there's nothing, not one, that has to do with His generosity. And then we come to a church in our day and age that the average Christian church kind of has it in their mind that God might be a little stingy. You know, we know Him as Jehovah Jireh, but really we see Him manifested in most churches as Jehovah Needy. You know, I've always said salvation is free the first day. And from that next day on, I never have been backward. There's been an offering plate in my face. And so I come to find that there is a financial aspect to this thing. But how can we have a church 2,000 years of teaching without any foundation stone of our God being generous? That He is a generous God. And so as I begin to look at this, I came up with a few places in Scripture that might be interesting to you. John, the 2nd chapter, and the 6th verse, we come to when Jesus showed up at the wedding. You remember the first miracle and I didn't bring this out in the earlier service, but it's unique to notice that the first miracle that Jesus publicly performed was a miracle of total luxury. Total luxury. Had nothing to do. Nobody needed wine. They'd all been drinking all day. Think about it, though. I mean, you would really think that if someone was putting this thing together to show us who God really is, He'd be down in a hospital somewhere seeing about sick people, or He'd be somewhere in a poor part of town feeding people. But He shows up at a party. And He shows up with, listen to what He brings to the party here. The 6th verse says, and there were set there 6 water pots of stone, after the manner of the purifying of the Jews, containing 2 or 3 firkins apiece. Now, when you do the multiplication on that, that's 180 gallons of wine. 180 gallons of wine that is now put together. Jesus is present coming to the party. And then if you take and just take you can go on the internet and find this out, but in a gallon, I think there's 5 bottles in a gallon. And so that's 900 bottles of wine He brings to the wedding. And there's about, I think there's, I don't remember exactly how many in a case of wine, but that's 11 inches high as a wine case. And so that would be almost 180, let me get it in my mind a minute, almost 180 foot high. Somewhere in there. You do the math on that. I lost my note on that. But can you imagine this? Here comes the God of heaven. First place He does a miracle. Total luxury, absolute luxury. And not only that, but it's so much that it's beyond our ability to comprehend that someone would come with 180 gallons of wine, and the only thing you can say is that was generous. Our God is a generous God. And then you go a little bit further, and you find that Simon Peter one day, he lets Jesus use his boat for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. He comes, they're fishing, they're done, they brought the boats in, they're hanging up the nets. Jesus comes and he says, can I use your boat? Cast out a little bit, and he teaches the people for, let's say he took a long time. Let's say for 2 hours. Now, listen what happens next. In that Luke 5, 4 through 7, it says, now when they had left speaking, he said unto Simon, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a draught. And Simon answering said unto him, Master, we've toiled all night and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word, I'll let down the net. And when he had this done, they enclosed a great multitude of fish, and their net brake. And they beckoned unto their partners, which were in the other ships, that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both ships, and they began to sink. Now, think about this. A 2-hour rental on a boat, and there's 2 boats full of fish that are about to sink. Now, that's generous for 2-hour rental on a boat. 2-hour rental on a boat. Now, isn't it strange that our theologians could not put that into the basic foundation stones of the attributes of our God, that he's a generous God? But it's missing, and we know the culprit why it's missing. The devil sees to it that those things don't make it, that we have a hard God, and like that one that only had 1 talent. He took and hid the talent, and he said, I knew you were a hard man, and that you reaped where you didn't sow, and one thing and the other. You know what Jesus said to him? He said, you knew I was a tough man. So you got the kind of God that you assume that he is. He's not going to argue with you about who he is. If you think he's a hard God, you're going to have a hard God. But if he's a gracious God, you're going to live with a gracious God. Are you picking this up a little bit? I mean, it's all over the book. And moving on a little bit, fish fry. First, all-you-can-eat fish fry. And we see in John 21 and 2, there were together Simon Peter, Thomas, called Didymus, Nathanael of Cana of Galilee, 2 sons of Zebedee, and 2 of his disciples. That's 8, and Jesus would make 9. And Simon Peter said unto him, I go fishing. This is after the death of Christ and just prior to him understanding the resurrection. We also go with thee, the other disciple said. And they went forth and entered into a ship, and immediately that night they caught nothing. So now you're going to find in a minute when this fish fry takes place, these are not these boys' fishes. These are Jesus' fish. And when the morning was come, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples knew not that it was Jesus. Then Jesus said unto them, Children, have ye any meat? They answered, No. And he said unto them, Cast the net on the right side of the ship, and you shall find. And they cast therefore, and now they were not able to draw it for the multitude of fishes. And Jesus said, Bring the fish which ye have now caught, my fish, bring my fish. Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land full of great fishes, 153. For all there were so many, yet the net didn't break. Jesus said unto them, Come and dine. And his disciples, they came and ate then. Think with me a minute. 153 fish, 9 people, 17 fish each. First all-you-can-eat fish fry in history. And it was Jesus that did it. It wasn't Mickey D. Are you picking up what I'm trying to show you here? Then there's a time that there's 5,000 men, plus women and the children, and they're hungry, and it's time for to eat. And then the theologians come along with some goofy thing. They say this little boy has his lunch here. No. You don't send a boy with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes for lunch. That's a pretty big lunch. This is a little entrepreneur that had him a fish and bread biscuit business. He saw a crowd and he's up there selling. I'm telling you, your book is about entrepreneurs that are out there trying to get something done to make a little money. Nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong at all. But now, when it's done, what does the boy get for that? Does he get his fish back? He gets 12 baskets full. 12 baskets full. And if it's just 30-fold, small change when God gives. If it's 30-fold, he got 150 barley loaves and 60 fish back. Are you hearing what I'm trying to say? Our God is a generous God. He is generous to a fault. There's nothing like it anywhere. I mean, nobody shows up at a wedding with 900 bottles of wine. Come on. And I mean, don't get into the wine. Was it grape juice? If it was grape juice, 900 bottles of grape juice is a lot to bring to a wedding. Think with me. There's a widow woman that gave a man of God a piece of her son's last meal, maybe 10 cents worth, maybe 10 cents worth. 1 Kings 17, it tells about it. Arise and get thee to Zarephath that belongeth to Zidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. Now watch this. Make yourself a note. Luke 4:25. No other widow was visited in that famine. Yeah. Only one. And you want to know what was different about her? She was a steward. You know how we know she was a steward? Because you ask a person that's not a steward to give. But a person that's a steward, you command them to give because they're not handling their money, they're handling God's money. My, think of that. He said, I commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. Boy, I tell you, when I became a steward of God, how easy it became to give because I knew he was a generous God. Now, please, let me pick something up real quick. Go back to when I've been a mission giver all of my Christian life. We always gave as much as our tithe or more to missions every year. And we used the faith promise method. And what we did was every time we had a conference, we would decide something that we could do without so that we could give more to missions. And then I would not buy a hot lunch, I would sack a lunch. And then I would have other things that we would change. And we were continuously increasing our giving, and we were believing that we could get by without it. And year after year, we got by without it, and we gave big to missions. But watch, something changed when I understood biblical economics. I didn't start giving, but I started expecting not to get by without it, but to end up with more of it than I had when I started. The only thing that happened was my expectation changed. I went from expecting not to have it anymore and to do without it, and God did it. Exactly what I was expecting is exactly what happened. I did not become a giver when I got this message. I was a giver, but I was not an expector of 30-fold, 60-fold, and even 100-fold whenever I gave. Isn't that a simple thing? That same process, faith promise, it's all over the world. And people have that powerful moment right there that they could become wealthy on their mission giving, but instead they get by without what they gave up. See, it's just so close right up here in your Holy of Holies that you get the right attitude about what God's getting ready to do for you. Oh, glory to glory. Anybody understand any of this? Where were we at? There's a lady here. Yes, she's a good woman. She knows how to take command. She's a steward. So he arose and went to Zarephath, and when he came to the gate of the city, behold, the widow woman was there gathering her sticks. And he called to her and said, fetch me, I pray thee, a little water in the vessel, that I may drink it. Let me say this. In a famine, in a drought, the most valuable thing in the world is water. He asked the woman for water, and she goes to get it. But see, nothing changed. Nothing changed in her circumstances because God's got water. Water's not valuable to God. Water's valuable to us. God owns all the water in the universe. But watch what happens here. Things are going to change for her, but it's not when the valuable moves. Something else is going to move. And when that moves, God's hand moves. Watch with me. And as she was going to fetch it, 11th verse, he called to her and said, bring me, I pray thee, a morsel of bread in thy hand. And she said, as the Lord thy God liveth, I have not a cake, but a handful of meal in a barrel, and a little oil in a cruse. And behold, I'm gathering 2 sticks, and I may go in and dress it for me and my son, that we may die. Now the man of God sees something. He now sees a way out of her problem, because he sees something that is not only valuable, but he sees something that's precious. And when something's precious to you, it becomes precious to God. And when you put the precious in his hand, he moves. Watch. And Elijah said, fear not, go and do as I said, but make me thereof a little cake first. Now then, something's going to happen. And bring it unto me, and after that make for thee and thy son. For thus saith the Lord of Israel, the barrel of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil fail, until the day that the Lord sendeth rain upon the earth. Are you hearing what I'm saying to you? The valuable. If I reach in my pocket and take 1 penny and put it on this altar, the United States government will tell you something valuable just went on that altar. but I have someplace else I can reach and get something, and it's all of a sudden it's precious. And when it's precious, the God of heaven says, all right, what can I do for you, son? When the precious moves, the hand of God moves. Don't think so? Whole world died and went to hell until God laid down something precious. And when he laid down something precious, he's never said no to another person that said, Jesus, come into my heart and save my soul. My Lord, think about the precious. When you give, be sure what comes to this altar is precious. And if it's precious, God's hand will go from this place with you to wherever you go. He'll go before you. Are you hearing what I'm saying? And she went and did according to the saying of Elijah. And she and he and her house did eat many days. And the barrel of meal wasted not, neither the cruse of oil failed. According to the word which the Lord spake of Elijah. One piece of small cake, maybe worth 10 cents, now has brought food for months and possibly for a year, till the drought stopped. It fed a woman, her house, and Elijah, probably hundreds of meals poured forth. When the precious moves, God's hand moves. You'll never lay the precious on this altar and leave here without God's shadow over you as you move from this place. Oh, glory to God, glory to God. Generous, generous beyond reason. It's not even reasonable, the generosity of God. When God canceled all of the mortgages in Israel, how generous. Come in and just wipe out the mortgages in a nation, just like that. And it's in the book, your God's a debt-canceling God. He's a debt-canceling God. Now, mathematically, anybody can get out of debt. But miraculously, seeds can get you out of debt. Debt-free seeds can get you out of debt. My son David, one time he bought a new pickup truck. This is the honest truth. Bought a brand new pickup truck, GMAC financing, got it all done, everything tied up. He got home, month went by, 2 months, no payment book. So he calls up and he says, I bought the truck and I haven't got my payment book. Well, we'll look into it. So they look into it and nobody calls him back. So he calls back again and says, my payment book, I don't have a payment book. So it bantered around there, and a little while somebody came on the phone and said, son, if I was you, I'd just shut up and enjoy the truck. There's no record here whatsoever. There's no record. This is a true story. There's no record here you owing a dime on that truck. Miracle debt cancellation will get you out of debt quick. Now, if you go and start trying to do it mathematically, there's some tricks you can use, and it's good to have some tricks to try to get your bills paid. But the miracle debt cancellation, in 15 days, God took me absolutely, totally out of debt. I told him, I said, God, I can't take people where I haven't been. I see the message of debt cancellation in the book, but if you don't know the way to New York, I don't want to ride with you to New York. I'd rather ride on a horse with somebody that knew the way to New York than in a Rolls Royce with somebody that didn't know where they were going. You understand what I'm saying? And I said, God, if I'm going to take you people out of debt, I got to be out of debt. I can't take a person where I hadn't been. And I mean, in 15 days, I was out of debt in 2 countries where they would not allow money to come out of the country. And I can't get into the whole story. I'll tell it another time. But you could not move 1 penny out of that country. And when I got home, my money was sitting in the bank waiting for me. Miracle debt cancellation. Oh, he's generous. He's a generous God. Oh, here's one. The time in the Bible that a total debt-free miracle took place. Did I finish that mortgage? No, I didn't tell you about the mortgages being canceled. Nehemiah 5. And there was a great cry, and the people of their wives cried about debt. They won't lend him a dime if you don't sign. My wife held me just flat to many a time. It was all kind of shiny stuff. I was ready to pull up in the driveway that never showed up in my driveway because I said, I ain't signing that. I will not sign that paper. We've got a car, and it's going to be all right. And when we get one, we'll get a cash car. That's what I'll buy a car cash when it's time to buy a car. Yeah, so wives, you look again and again about debt, and it's in the Bible several times that the wives cry out and God moves on the debt. Start crying, wives. Number 3, There were that said, we mortgaged our lands and our vineyards, our houses, that we might buy corn because of the dearth. You know what the word mortgage means? Death grip. Morgue, death. Ask a pipe fitter what a calibrator, whenever you grip something with a calibrator, you gauge it. Death grip. Hello, friendly death grip company has your house. There were also that said, we borrowed money for the king's tribute, and that upon our lands and our vineyards. I was very angry when I heard their cry. Pastor, churches get out of debt when the preacher gets angry about the debt, because all of your dreams are tied up in monthly payments somewhere. And these words, very angry when I heard their cry, and these words. And I consulted with myself, and I rebuked the nobles and the rulers, and said unto them, you exact usury every one of his brother. And I set a great assembly against them. Restore, I pray, unto them even this day their lands, their vineyards, their olive yards, their houses, also the 100th part of the money, and the corn and the wine and the oil that they exact. And then said they, we will restore them and require nothing of them. So will we do as thou sayest. What is your mortgage? Is your mortgage an animal that's in a box somewhere that they're holding? Is your mortgage a block of something? Your mortgage is just words. Just words. Words brought them in. Words can take them out. Words brought them in. Words can take them out. Oh, Lord, how are you hearing this? The whole nation set free of debt. Generous. There's no way to explain how generous. Magnanimous is another word that could very easily be used here. The time for debt, the time in the Bible, that total debt-free miracle and a fully funded retirement started with borrowing binge. A borrowing binge. You know, I've had some times, people get upset with me about this, I've had some times that I wanted to give. God told me the amount to give, and I didn't have it. But I had credit card, and I put it on the credit card. They said, is that right? Well, I put all kind of other stuff on it that God didn't want me to have. I got in so much trouble with credit cards, they wouldn't give me any more. You didn't live in the ugly day when they'd take it away from you. They got a reward for taking it away. If you give it to the merchant would keep the card in the early days, back before it got more profitable to let people just owe money. Here we go, 1 Kings 4. You all right with me? Now they cried a certain woman of the wives crying again. Now the prophets unto Elijah, saying, thy servant, my husband, is dead, and thou knowest thy servant did fear the Lord, and the creditors come to take unto him my 2 sons to be bondsmen. And Elisha said unto her, what shall I do for thee? Tell me, what hast thou in thy house? And she said, thine handmaid hath not anything in the house save a pot of oil. They've already auctioned everything off in the house except that little pot of oil. Then he said, go borrow the vessels abroad of all thy neighbors, even empty vessels, borrow not a few. And now watch this thing here. You're going to learn something about miracles. You're going to learn something about the size of miracles. Let me help you first with something. Just see, is there any people here that really may have had a miracle? How many of you ever had a credit card payment, a house payment, something that you couldn't make, and you prayed to God and you sent the payment?
Yes, he did.
Why don't you just ask him to pay the whole thing off? You're going to learn that the size of your miracle is controlled by you, not by God. Every miracle comes out of heaven big as God. Look at here. Then she said, go borrow the vessels abroad of thy neighbors, even empty vessels, borrow not a few. And when thou art come in, thou shalt shut the door upon thee. And by the way, if you're going to get out of debt, don't tell anybody. Don't go tell all the family. They'll talk you out of it. Just keep it to yourself. Just go in and shut the door. Don't need to know. Shall pour out unto those vessels, and thou shalt set aside that which is full. So she went from him, shut the door upon her and upon her sons, and brought in the vessels to her, and she poured out. And it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said unto her son, bring me yet a vessel. Yeah. Wait a minute. She is upgrading that miracle, because you're going to find here she's got a debt, but she also is going to turn it into a retirement policy, because she's got control of that miracle. It's going to, you getting what I'm saying to you? We choke these things down till we can receive them. But God says, look, I want to pour it out on you big as I am, because I am that generous God that's like no one else in the whole universe. Oh, come on. Are you with me on this? Let me find my place again. Okay. Bring me out a vessel. And bring me out a vessel. And it said to her, there's not a vessel more. And the oil stayed. And she came and told the man of God, and he said, go sell the oil and pay thy debt. And live thou and thy children of the rest. She turned it into a retirement policy besides just an out-of-debt plan, because you control that miracle, what size it's going to be. It's up to you. Whew. See, and I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I was just showing you it's your nature to ask for a payment instead of paying the whole thing off. Are we learning anything? How generous, how generous, how generous. Well, let me give you some generous scriptures. Ephesians 3:20. Now unto him that is able to do exceedingly abundantly, above all you can ask or think, according to the power that worketh in you. Is it going to be big or is it going to be little? It's not decided in heaven whether it'll be big or little. It's decided right in your Holy of Holies. It's decided right there between your eyes whether that thing's going to be big or whether it's going to be little. Judges 18:10. When you go, you will come to a people secure, to a large land, for God has given it unto your hands, a place where there is no want for anything that's in the earth. No want for anything that's in the earth. Why don't we read that verse more? Psalm 68:19. Blessed be the Lord who daily loadeth us with benefits. Daily. Are you ready for your load today? Well, have you decided the amount that it's going to be? We've already been to the altar. Did you decide? Is it going to be a big load or is it going to be a little sprinkle? Woo. Think about it. Think about it. Generosity. Generosity just explodes with God. Think a moment. What is it that you need from God that's big? What is it? I don't know exactly what it might be. There's different things in people's lives. Sometimes it might just be a health thing. All the money in the world might not solve what the thing is. But whatever it is you need, God's ready to give it to you if you're ready to receive it, because he's generous. He's generous. Did you know he has a different sunset every few miles? And he never reruns one twice? Did you know all the stars in the sky? There's no end to them. There's 1 billion galaxies out there beyond this one where the stars are just a twinkling. Why did he do that? So that you could have a starlit night. Oh, child of God, he's generous. Our God is a generous God. He's generous in forgiving sins. Oh, think about it. Micah 7:18. Who is a God like unto thee, that pardoneth iniquity, passeth by transgressions of the remnant of his heritage, that retaineth not his anger forever, because he delighteth in mercy. Yeah. Listen, that 19th verse, he will turn again. He will have compassion upon us. He will subdue our iniquities, and thou wilt cast all our sins into the depths of the sea. Yeah. Can you picture this? The Baptists always said, cast into the sea of God's forgetfulness, never to be remembered against you again. Can you picture that? That sin, that awful person that you were, and that awful person that's been in that underlining one that you're going to leave in the grave. Just think about it. All that God said, that's over. If you've been to the cross, it's past. We're not going to be dealing with that anymore. It's in the sea of forgetfulness, never to be remembered against you again. And then, as far as the east is from the west, Psalms 103:10. He hath not dealt with us after our sins, nor rewarded us according to our iniquities. The 11th verse. For as the heaven is higher than the earth, so greater is mercy toward them that fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far as he removed our transgressions from us. It's spheral infinity. Do you know what that means? There is no border anywhere. Yeah. Infinity never stops. Now, if there's no border, then there's no center. And if there's no center, then everyone's in the center. Do you understand what I just said to you? You are in the center. Wherever you are in the universe, you're in the center of God in his infinity. My Lord, I mean, I live in a very special place. I live in the center of God's universe. You live in the center of God's universe. You're the apple of his eye. I mean, there's not another one like you. I mean, you count the molecules in you. You take all of those measurements, and there's nothing like you, never been anything like you, never be anything like you again. But you are special to God, and the very hairs on your head are numbered. He knows you, he knows you, he knows you. Oh, my Lord. Think about this. He forgives sins. He forgives sins. And then I take one more real quickly. Bear with me. Backslider. Doesn't take much to be backslidden. Doesn't take much to be backslidden. But you know, there's something about the backslider. I remember preaching about the backslider. You come back and then you're going to be humble and you're going to have to behave yourself and sit in the back row and all that mess. No, that's not in the Bible. Job 22:23. If thou return to the Almighty, thou shalt be built up. Thou shalt put iniquity far from thy tabernacles. The 24th verse, then shalt thou lay up gold as dust. God says, come on back, backslider. I want to make you rich. Give you gold like dust. We're not going to reward you with a whipping. You're not going to sit on the back row. You're going to be front row stuff. Then shalt thou lay up gold as dust, and the gold of offers, the stones of the brook. And yea, the Almighty shall be thy defense, and thou shalt have plenty of silver. Oh, let me tell you. The generosity of God, it's like nothing else.